Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video. This is our run on Friday, the Ocean Cup race around Catalina Island from Huntington Beach, California. It was a distance race, endurance race, and it was our first time to shake out the super fountain in a actual race setting. I wanted to show a video on how the conditions were, how the boat handled. I only got forward facing video today, so I wanted to do a little voiceover and kind of explain where we are on the course, what we're doing, what we're working on, kind of what our thoughts were at the moment. But as you can see, the seas are a little rougher than normal. A normal race usually wouldn't be this rough, but we're out there getting into the Pacific pretty far. You can see we're clearing the waves. The boat attitude is pretty good. This is actually Jeff and I's first time in the boat together, so a lot of us learning each other's style and driving, and Jeff was on the wheel today, and you'll see we're kind of making our way. At this point, we're almost to Catalina Island. We're a few miles out. You can see the mountains on the horizon. We took a pretty hard hit right there, and it actually slowed the boat down because it put one of the engines in a start sequence. It confused the engine because the pressure valve closed, and the engine thought it was starting again. So we're back down to idle. We're trying to get some speed, and there comes the helicopter overhead. When the helicopter was, we were the second to leave, so the helicopter was over Nigel when it left. So I'm assuming Nigel's here pretty close behind us at this point. We were having to run 70, 80 miles an hour, sometimes 90, close to 90, but it was just, we were getting pretty hammered right out of the beginning. And there comes Nigel, the Lucas Oil boat, on our port side. We saw him, and we're trying to work our way towards him a little bit. That way we could get behind him and maybe he could break up some of the waves for us. At that point, we crossed around Shiprock Island, and we were heading towards the north point of the island. And we're actually trying to pick up some speed. And if you look in front of us, Nigel's got quite a bit of lead on us. And I'd noticed at this point that Nigel had slowed up there, and it's a little easier with your vision than it is this camera, but I could see his boat was in pretty hard shape, so I was thinking, well, it might be getting a little worse up at the north side of the island. So I had Jeff correct our course. We were going to head right off that point there and try to head north, and we really needed to start making some ground up at this point. I kind of felt like me and Jeff had a little bit of a learning curve when you got somebody new in the boat, and so we were starting to push it a little bit harder here, wanting to at least not let Nigel get too far ahead of us, so when we get some clear water we could really push the engines hard. In this kind of condition, these engines have no, or we had no overspeed protection on the engine, so the engines themselves, when they leave the surface of the water, when the props do, the engines could actually overspeed. So that was something we were testing out for the first time with these engines, and really just had to put it to test before we could find out what was going to happen. But I found out the engines didn't really tend to overspeed. They kind of kept a continuous RPM even when the air, I mean, there is a little bit of a upspeed, but nothing drastic. So I was pretty pleased with that. But as you can see here, we're crossing around the point of Catalina, one of the north points, the northeasternmost point. It does start to get quite a bit rougher. You see us crawling up a wave, going down in a valley, over one, hitting pretty hard, back up again. There we took a pretty good hit right in the belly of the boat, trying to really figure out where we're going to run this across the north point. At this point, just to kind of give you an idea what we were talking about, is I was trying to convince Jeff to get closer to the shore. That way the rocks might protect us a little bit, and we were having a bit of a discussion on if the rocks were a protection or danger to us. So it was actually just one of those things you work out during the race to figure out where you're going to run. But we start getting back on course here. Boat's still running good, tons of power. Don't really have any problems going on at this point, other than it is rough. Me and Jeff were discussing also how hard do we want to run it in this to try to conserve the boat. You know, anytime you run heavier in this stuff, it does get to be a challenge, not for us, but the boat itself. But I really wanted to give the boat a good shakedown also, so I didn't want to just take it too easy. I wanted to see what was going to fail if something was going to fail. So it's just trying to figure out what's going to run the best. But you can see we're running along here, actually getting some speed again. About midway point to the most northern point of the island, the boat's running again really good. We're setting up. Our bow isn't rising. I really wish I had a rear camera. It would really put a lot of this in perspective. You see how far we're in the air when we actually are in the air. But I think we take a couple of pretty good hits here coming up. You can kind of see that we dip down in the waves. You know, the horizon tends to not show the deep valleys of the waves, and so you're only seeing the big ones come at you, but you don't always see the valley you may drop into before you launch it out off a big wave. But you can just make out Nigel there off to the left, and so we're still not too far behind him as he make the turn, and we're again trying to keep the course the shortest distance and making our way towards that north point of the island. Everything was going pretty good. We took a couple of other big hits. You can see the waves actually come in sets, the swells. You'll see we get about 4 or 5, maybe 6 big swells, and then it kind of clears out a little bit, and then you'll run along, and then same thing, 4 or 5 big swells. But see here, we are working our way back towards the island, trying to make the course as short as possible. But overall, this was definitely one of the rougher periods of the course. We were running along here, going to make the turn around the island, but you can still see we're still taking a pretty good pounding getting through this. And I was actually thinking in my head, I hope it's not like this the entire way around this island, because I'm not for sure I can handle it, let alone the boat. So, but we're going along here fine. Again, not much sunshine. The fog is actually starting to lift a little bit, so visibility is improving. Didn't see a lot of boats out there. Right when we crossed the point before this one, we did see one right up against the shore fishing. But we're going to come around this point right here, and I thought this is the point that it might smooth out a little bit, but in actuality, it did not. It kept giving us the big swells in sets of 3 to 6, and just really trying to work over them without overworking the boat or overworking the engines. You can see now Jeff is making a hard turn. This is actually quite a hard turn around the most northern point of the island back towards to head south, and overall it started to calm down here a little bit. The only other thing that that happened was really that you've shown on video was as we was crossing the next point, there's a little seal here that jumps out of the water, and it will kind of show his face right here in the left side of the video. and I saw him in the race, and then he jumped again right here towards the boat, and I thought, well, that seal trying to eat lunch was quite surprised, I'm sure, when we went by him. At this point, one engine had lost oil pressure, so I pulled it off, or I shut the engine down. The engine oil pressure light flashed a couple times and pretty much came on solid, so I shut it down. Didn't know what had happened. Long story short, the one of the oil lines had sat down on the sensor for the oil temperature that would turn the fan on automatically, and it actually grounded out the oil line into the 12-volt system, thus pumping out putting a hole in the line and then pumping out all the oil. It was a really fun race, hell of a race, a lot of fun. Jeff was, like a pro on the wheel. He kept things moving forward, added to the boat good. Just one of them things that kind of happens in offshore racing. Your boat is going to get tested. At this point, we were just trying to figure out how we're going to make it home. It was a long ways around the island. We were on the boat for about 10 hours that day, maybe 11 hours by the time we got home. But it was a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody. Thanks for everybody for supporting us. Check us out on our next race. Keep up with us on Facebook, YouTube, and we will see you guys at the next race.